Okay, there we go.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting of the Village Plan Commission to order at 6:32 p.m. We are joined tonight by Commissioner Klain. Did I do it right? All right. Woo. Commissioner Pollock, Trustee McGovern, Commissioner Flynn Post, and myself. So we do have quorum, and Commissioners Klein and Wickland have been excused. The first item of action that's required is approval of the October 28th, 2025 Plan Commission meeting minutes. And so at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee McGovern, seconded by Commissioner Klain. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes are approved as presented. Item 3, update and further discussion of the Plan Commission's proposed initiative to increase housing opportunities in the village. So this comes back to us from Director Griepentrag with the inclusion of survey results. Thank you to Commissioner Flynn Post for your collaboration on that. So there are a few points that we need to provide final direction so that a draft ordinance can be prepared and taken to the village board. I believe that's the process that we're hoping for.
Correct.
Okay. So I will defer to you to walk us through the points that you feel need further discussion or your resolution.
Would you mind a brief summary of the survey
I
results as
would
well?
not. I would welcome that.
Sure.
In fact,
It'll go quick, hopefully.
it's fresh in my mind because I just read it.
Okay. Sally, can you see the screen? Has it changed? Okay, I get that wrong sometimes. So we did do a housing opportunity survey in January as directed by the Plan Commission after our last meeting to gather some public input with respect to the various topics that we've been discussing, primarily accessory dwelling units. We received 280 responses, which I thought was a pretty hefty response. We published it in the village manager's memo and on social media, so our typical channels. 97% of respondents were Shorewood residents, 90% were homeowners, 40% had lived in Shorewood for greater than 20 years, 24% between 10 and 20, and 20% between 5 and 10. And then 40% lived in the northwest quadrant, quote unquote, 28 in the northeast, 28 in the southeast, 4% in the southwest. That matches pretty much the demographics of population and things like that. So it's pretty representative, at least in my opinion, of the response rate. So hopefully the responses are pretty comprehensive. The primary question that we started out with were subject to defined regulations. Would you like the village to allow ADUs? 64% people said yes, all types, including integrated or attached to the primary structure and detached structure. So a majority of the village respondents did want all types of ADUs. 23%, 4% also said yes, but only if integrated or attached. So there was less issues with a detached than perhaps one might have expected, but 23% did say no and 10% were unsure. I don't have all the charts in here, they're in your packet. So just a quick overview of some questions. So we did ask what types of properties people wanted ADUs to be allowed at. 71%, and they could select multiple choices here. 71% said to allow them at single unit, single family houses, and 42% said duplexes. So a majority said, allow them at single unit houses, but at duplexes, they were less convinced. There was a question on ADUs and short-term rentals. 34% did say that the benefits of ADUs outweighed the difficulties of prohibiting or enforcing short-term rentals. 10% actually said to allow both. 25% said to allow ADUs only if short-term rentals are prohibited and enforced. And then 24% did say that short-term rentals, the negatives outweighed the benefits of a possible ADU. So kind of some clear direction there, but also multiple opinions expressed. And then 74% did favor requiring owner occupancy at the time of development, which is one of the things we discussed at last meeting. I believe the city of Milwaukee was the one where we grabbed that from as a possibility. So that was seen as something that the village should consider. This was a question that I had a hard time formulating in my head how best to do this, and I'm not sure if there are clear results or not. But we did ask people to prioritize the regulations that they thought were most important, and so just the top vote getter on that would be to not reduce maximum lot coverage. So right now, 30% for a primary structure, 10% for an accessory structure, so 40% total. People, the majority of respondents said not to exceed that 40% for an ADU. Second, with height limits, not to exceed height limits, which I think makes sense. People aren't expecting an ADU to change the context of the built environment, is what we learned. And then third, architecture and design were important. We would treat that similar to any other home improvement, which would go to the design review board. So that was always in the plan, but it did show up as the third most important thing. Placement of the ADU in relation to the primary structure was fourth. Size of the ADU in relation to the size of the primary unit was fifth. The parking type, as in enclosed or surface, was sixth. And then the required amount of parking was seventh. So those were the 7 that we asked for. You can see in the right-hand side the level of response. And so there's not a huge, swing in things, but the 2 parking issues were the least important, but still important to some people.
Your slides aren't advancing from what I can see.
Okay, that was the question I was trying to get at the
I'm
beginning.
sorry.
Nope,
Yeah.
yep. This room is different than the other room, and I need Therese to help me understand what I do wrong here always. I'll just finish up talking about this last one, and then we can maybe I turn it over to you for discussion. So the next question was, would you be interested in building or creating an ADU at your personal property in Shorewood? 49% said that they would not. 20% said yes. 21% were unsure, did not know. That kind of matches what we thought is people like this idea, but it might not, catch fire with people with respect to whether or not they want to or whether or not they can afford to. So it is an idea to allow ADUs, but once again, I think we've discussed in the past, we're not convinced this is a huge, large scale change based on results in other communities and just the reality of the lot size and the cost of developing them. So let me end the slideshow, and I need to mirror my screen if anyone remembers how to do that. Ooh. So I don't know, President McKeag, if you could maybe perhaps, or we can take a
Proceed.
pause. I don't know, and just ask if there's any questions in the survey or something. Sorry.
No problem. I think before I open discussion on the floor, it looks like we have a couple of residents or members of the public who have joined us this evening. And since Director Riemenschlag just reviewed the survey results, I think it makes sense to ask the members of the public if they'd like to be heard on this matter. If you are coming just to observe, that's fine too, no pressure.
I answered the survey.
Okay, so are you attending just to observe, or is there something you want to add?
Just to observe for this part.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see this slide, Sally? If I don't, okay, I'm just going to show it in this view then. Okay, so I'm ready, I guess. Sorry.
Okay.
So I think that wrapped up the questions on accessory dwelling units. We did also ask for responses with respect to our other 2 ideas or recommendations. So this one asked whether or not the village should maintain its current definition of household, which is interpreted to disallow more than 3 unrelated adults living together. And the majority, 48%, said no, we should keep the current definition, or I'm reading it backwards here, but they said yes, keep the current definition, not change it. 23% said no, modify it to allow up to 4 individuals or unrelated adults, and then an additional 15% said to allow more than that. So if you combine those 2 together, it'd be 38%, but 48% said did believe maintaining the current definition was important to them. And then lastly, the question about the village currently prohibits the development of bedrooms and basements. So we asked whether or not we should maintain that. And I think a pretty large majority, 69%, said no, we should remove that. 21% said to keep it, and 10% were unsure. So that's the summary of the public involvement or engagement that we did. Like I said, I believe it was pretty representative. We had a lot of responses. They were varied in tenure and location. We didn't get a lot of renters to respond. That's not uncommon. So I guess we can keep that in mind as well. But with respect to what I'm hoping we can accomplish tonight, just wanted to go through some quick discussion on whether or not, based on those results, the Plan Commission is interested in changing any of their previous recommendations with respect to household definition, bedrooms and basements, and accessory dwelling units. And I could go through the ADU ones, one by one if we'd like to, but that is how the packet is set up, would be to discuss household definition first, bedrooms and basements second, and then ADUs third.
Thank you. So would you like me to facilitate
Sure.
from here, from chair? All right. To the plan commissioners, we made a recommendation to increase the household size to 4 adults. Is there any desire to change that? Is there a motion to change that recommendation? All right, hearing no motion from the floor. The next item is bedrooms in basements. Is there any motion to change that recommendation? All right, so we stand on those two. In terms of the accessory dwelling unit recommendations, it felt like there were a couple of items that you wanted more direction on, or more clear direction.
Sure. I mean, if the survey results changed your opinions, I think that's primarily where I'm coming from. But I did include in here where we left off with them. There was probably, I think, 8 to 10 bullet points. I'm happy to just, if you don't have it in front, or how you'd like to do it, but
Right. I don't think we need to.
okay.
I would be inclined to resolve the ones that we hadn't given direction on. And maybe I'm not recalling it, but I felt like there were a couple where I'm not sure that we landed someplace. Even when I was reading, I wasn't clear. Is that true or no?
I actually thought I had direction on everything,
Oh.
and I was just confirming them.
Okay.
So
I thought it was enclosed parking spaces. Was that one resolved?
let me take a second look at my memo.
Sorry for the confusion. I should have called you ahead of time. Make sure my read of the.
So just for my own, so within the parking discussion, it said, where we left off was no additional parking shall be required. Existing parking shall be maintained. So if you develop an ADU, that unit wouldn't need it, but existing parking would need to be there. Options for discussion were should current parking requirements be kept? Should parking be exempted from accessory dwelling units on lots with accessory dwelling units? Should unenclosed parking spaces, including driveways, be allowed to meet required parking? Parking type and requirements were the least important regulations to maintain or identified in the survey. So yes, I think to your point, that perhaps was one outstanding question of should unenclosed parking spaces, including driveways, be allowed to meet the required parking? So that would be if a single unit house currently has a garage that you're parking within, that qualifies as your parking, and it's currently required to have that. If you wanted to turn that garage into an ADU, and have, someone live in that garage, could you then park on your driveway as a qualifying parking space, which would allow you to convert your existing garage without having to build a new garage for your for your required parking. Otherwise, you're looking at having to build above or behind or attached to. So I think that is a good question to perhaps discuss.
So I would like to hear positions on that. I think Trustee McGovern, you had a strong position.
Yeah, I was in favor of, using your driveway as a parking space
Mhm.
to satisfy their.
I would feel comfortable removing the enclosed parking requirement from our ordinance. Others? Commissioner Klein? Pollock? Okay, so we have unanimous direction to remove the enclosed parking requirement, but to maintain parking.
Okay. I did see Sally had her hand up if you wanted to.
I just
Miss
wanted
Sally?
to say that, we don't park in our garage, and if we were to build an ADU, it would be where the garage is. So I feel very strongly that that garage should be allowed to be used for building an ADU.
Thank you. We agree with you.
Thank you. That's why I put my hand down because I thought,
Yeah.
okay, this is going the way I expected.
Is there anyone on the commission that needs to revisit maintaining the parking? I feel like that was the majority was to recommend. Okay.
Can you say that?
So we would maintain, I'll
Maintain
have,
the requirement to have some level of off-site parking. So I just heard direction that that could be in the driveway or a parking pad. But is there a desire to remove parking requirements in total?
That's an.
I believe that's what you were going
for
with.
discussion. Sure, I'll move.
I'd second that as well.
Commissioner Clean expressed interest in that. I think I would lean towards maintaining the one space for the primary dwelling. I would not require that we add parking with an ADU, and I would remove the enclosed requirement. So that would be my position.
Excuse me, that's the same position that I have.
Okay. But the motion on the floor is to remove all parking requirements.
Maybe didn't know the agenda.
Okay. So all those in favor of the motion on the floor, which is to remove, actually, could you read it as you recorded it?
Oh, I would probably say
Requirements from the ADU policy?
So that would be my clarification. So this is for only if you're building an ADU, or you're saying in general? Because I don't
Well, I
know.
mean,
I don't know that that was agendized to be
Yes.
that
Sorry,
large.
that's
of
why I
a-
It
like,
was not.
hey,
that large of a change.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure what we're trying to accomplish.
for
That's-
ADU.
I mean,
Or for
I want to
properties
keep this in
building
with the
ADUs?
realm of the ADU.
So your motion would be to remove parking for ADU or properties.
There should be no incremental or additional parking requirements.
Yes. So we have consensus on that.
Right.
I think the one change would be, if you build an ADU, do you have to maintain the parking for the primary residence?
So the example might be if you have a house with a garage that's alley served, and you turn your garage into an ADU, will we require you then to build a parking pad for your primary structure's required parking? So you don't have a driveway, so you can't claim a driveway to park in. Would be if you want to, swap your garage for an ADU, then are we going to require that you have a parking pad? That would be the current way it's going. But if you want to exempt that, that's what we're here to.
I would exempt.
That's what I was assuming, hearing. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go around again since,
Yeah,
and trustee
so
McGovern, so you would second that?
I would second that. And, I actually ended up not buying this house, but I looked at a house that it looked like they had started to build one. For whatever reason, they didn't actually build it, but it was on an alley. So like you wanted to follow through with something like that, you would then have to pave over part of your backyard to build a parking pad. It just
Which I
seemed
don't
kind of
think
pointless.
that we
So-
would do, or that wouldn't be allowed, would it?
We do allow parking slabs.
As long as you maintain the
Yeah.
amount of green space. Got it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So I don't
So-
want to just mandate that somebody build a parking spot if they want to do ADU. Like they're going to be spending enough money as it.
Mhm.
I just don't feel it's
Yep. So let's go around again because to make sure.
Yeah.
And then, we'll take a vote on it, or maybe we're ready to take a vote. Everybody's clear? Okay, all those in favor of the motion on the floor, which is to create an exemption for maintaining parking minimums on lots that build an ADU. So I can support that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? Nay. So 4-1.
Okay.
All right. Sorry if that was a little clumsy. All right. Are there any others that are?
I don't think so, because I wasn't even remembering that one. So, I think the rest of it, I think we did have it drafted when we had a consensus on everything that I can recall. So,
Including height? Mhm. Yeah, we landed at 20 feet, right? And then maintaining lot coverage was,
I believe we left it at the current ratios. There was a question out there as to whether or not, should we allow 40%, for a combination of principal and accessory structures if an accessory dwelling unit is developed. So for example, right now your lot is allowed to have up to 30% coverage for your primary unit or primary building, 10% for the accessory. But, say for example, your primary structure only occupies 20% and your accessory structure is 10%. You're only occupying 30%, but if you want to build another additional to your ADU, do we care that it's 30 and 10, or do we care for a maximum of 40 with an ADU would be perhaps one way to think about it.
and did we get direction on that?
I thought I was directed to leave it as is, but I can't say for certain that I recall that. I have to look at the minutes.
Okay, that's what I recall. So does anybody want to revisit that?
So we'd be leaving it as is as 30% then,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, okay. Does the commission feel a need or an interest in going clause by clause just to confirm?
Yes, I've spent a lot of time with this, so I'm trying to keep track of the commission conversation and then all the
survey.
details that I've been pouring over.
Okay.
So yeah, I would appreciate it.
That's good. It's a big policy change, so I think we should be detailed. So if you could just go through where we landed and to see if anybody wants to revisit those, that would be appreciated. So we've done 2.
So the first one was whether or not we would allow ADUs within the R1 through R6 district. The R6 district was the one that was questioned because that is the one that allows 2-unit residences. It also does allow single unit residences, and so it's both. So the question that we asked in the survey was whether or not ADUs should be allowed at property types, single unit, 2-unit, or 3 and above. Like I said, the primary response was to allow them at single unit, but there was I believe 40% to allow them at duplexes. So the question, just to confirm, is whether or not the Plan Commission wants to recommend limiting ADUs to only single unit buildings or single unit lots, or to allow them in 2-unit lots as well.
And where did we land the first time?
My recollection is that we allowed them in all R1 and R6 properties, so that we single and 2-unit structures.
Okay.
Form based.
I would move to change it to single unit to be aligned with the state legislation that's pending.
The new floor though. Right.
A new.
Floor, it would set the minimum.
Mhm.
It would be more expansive. Local rule. Right? Wouldn't be preempted.
I am not sure about that.
That is my understanding as well, is that they would, if passed, and I don't know where it's at or what it would be, if passed, it would require municipalities to have at least that, but you could allow more than that.
Okay. So would you like to make a motion?
Oh,
Oh, you did make a motion. Okay, is there a second? Okay, it fails for lack of second.
The next one, which I never heard anything other than consensus on, was to allow no more than 1 per lot, so you couldn't have 2 ADUs. That was never really discussed really, but that is part of the regulations. The next one was type, whether to allow internal, attached, or detached. Once again, the survey didn't have a preference to just disallow anything. I've never heard anyone within the conversation suggest not allow all 3 types, so the draft would have all 3 types allowed. The size, we left off with not to exceed the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. That was based on a review of
May I speak to that one? When you're,
If you, If you can hold, please. Thanks.
Sure.
So that 1,000 square foot or less, 1,000 square feet or the gross floor area of the principal building, that was developed based on Wauwatosa and Milwaukee's, ordinances with similar, building patterns in the region. So I didn't hear any desire to change that, but I'm open to conversation.
Okay, is there anyone on the commission who would like to make a motion to change that?
And exceed the,
So that I believe is what the state legislation draft has. So in my discussion comments, I say the proposed state legislation would limit accessory dwelling units only to being smaller than the principal use 1 unit dwelling. So ours is more restrictive than that by saying 1,000 square feet or the gross floor area. So if there's a desire to change it, I'm here for the conversation.
Okay, would you like to make a motion?
make a motion to as minimum larger than principal.
Is
Excuse me,
there,
not to exceed the gross floor area.
okay. Is there a second? I would support that for discussion. Or a second. I'll provide a second. So motion by Commissioner Pollak, seconded by President McCaig. Discussion?
Remember, no one's going to make,
Right.
not going to.
Ms. Sally?
So are you now at the point where you're saying the ADU cannot be larger than the principal residence? Or are you
Correct.
still the 1,000 square feet?
The motion that I made was that we should remove the smaller 1,000 square feet. with the-
Okay, yes, I think because they're so expensive to build that other things like height requirements and lot coverage and things like that should determine the maximum size. And somebody may want to build larger than 1,000 square feet, and I think it should be allowed.
Mhm. Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment about environmental concerns, and I appreciated the Conservation Committee Chair weighing in on ADUs. Obviously, this is a complex topic, but I'm wondering if there's any sort of environmental factor that we have any data that we can look at in terms of lot coverage or managing stormwater or building materials, or, there's a whole laundry list of things that we could be considering in terms of the environmental impact.
Mm.
I don't have that data,
Mm.
but to the point of the form-based standards, we would allow you to develop up to those setbacks, up to that height, up to that lot coverage. And so if we were to limit ADUs further for environmental reasons based on that, I think we'd have to have a conversation about limiting single unit dwellings the same way if that is concerning. So it would not be my expectation that that would be an impact, but
Just like we have green space.
correct.
All right, so at this time, I would like to call the question. All those in favor of the motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries 4-1.
The next one was the lot coverage discussion about currently it's 30% principal structure, 10% for the accessory structure. The question would be whether or not we would be interested in allowing up to 40% for a combination of both the principal and accessory structure if an ADU was developed. And we did not. Did we get a motion on that already?
Felt like, am I in Groundhog Day? I thought we did talk
I thought
about
we
that
did
already.
too. Okay,
Yes, so I think we resolved that.
sorry. Setbacks, there was never any question. We would keep the existing setbacks of rear side 3 to 10 feet based on the district. Height, it would be the same as the principal building or not to exceed 20 feet if detached. So the question for discussion was, should detached accessory structures be allowed at the same height as the principal structure, which would be up to 30 feet? Height limits were ranked as the second most important regulation to maintain.
And did we land anywhere with that?
Madam Chair, I would appreciate some conversation on this one in
Okay.
particular, just because I've heard that 20 feet might not be enough for
Mhm.
people to really develop a space, and then 30 feet being, obviously you're competing with the primary structure. I personally would be interested in talking about this.
Thank you. So we don't have documentation that we actually gave direction on this one, so it was left open. So would you like to start the discussion?
I mean, I think that those are my concerns are, could we land somewhere in the middle? I think that aesthetics, just from the survey results too, it seems that aesthetics are an important part of what we should be considering. And so if it's matching that 30 feet, maybe you're competing with the feeling of the block with primary residences versus ADUs. But then at the same time, is 20 feet tall enough to accommodate what people might want to build?
Is 20 feet in other ordinances? Or how did we end up with 20 feet?
So the current measurement is based on the mean of the peak of the roof and the ridge of the roof. And so people have been able to, I don't want to say it's a loophole, or get around that by, if you build as long as you maintain that average, your peak can go quite high. And so the modification would be to limit the peak to be 20 feet so that you are staying below that threshold. So I think I had showed that non-ADU along the alley. So right now people are building pretty tall roofs on garages based on that current interpretation or the current administration of that. So when it was discussed, for clarity's sake, the desire was, I believe by staff at least, was to put a maximum height of that peak on there, so that it was more clear. But yeah, if someone built a unique roof structure, you are able to go quite high, quite honestly. So,
And what's the concern that 20 feet maximum would be not enough to, it could,
Depending on the style of your house. Flat roof,
uh-huh,
or trying to
uh-huh,
flat roof. We're
yeah,
asking for two.
right.
I was looking at the zoning district summary table for all zone. I was curious, or did you consider just adopting building height at all based on the fit in the
Mm.
style of the structure?
so that I believe is where we landed off with. So the current notation in here is the same as the height, same as principal building, or not to exceed 20 feet if detached. So sorry, that's not where we left off. I don't know that was ever considered. No.
If we have an auxiliary structure, what's the max height?
So once again, it's measured by the mean of the roof.
For any auxiliary structure or just?
So like a
garage?
coach house or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Or garage?
I think any auxiliary, so not attached,
Uh-huh,
subject parts, peak mean roof can be complied with in very creative ways.
uh-huh.
And I thought we had a different standard for auxiliary.
We do. I'm making sure I quote it correctly, so I'm bringing it
lovely.
up on your screen. And it's always seemingly never in the place where you think it is. Accessory structures must not exceed 15 feet in height and shall not occupy more than 10% of the lot. And then in the definition section is where we discuss how that 15 feet is measured. So once again, you could have a 20-foot peak and still qualify under this current 15-foot height restriction because we measure that height at the mean of the peak and the ridge. Right now, a house is 30 feet, accessory structure is 15 feet, both with the same style of measurement.
I have no answer for this, so I'm going to rely on the commission to,
I'm
May
just
I
curious
ask a
why-
question?
Why 20 feet? Why was 20 feet number?
20 feet is typically what that mean height is. in current practice. So right now, and I'm not the building inspector, but right now someone is building a 25-foot peak roof with, you know, a 10-foot there, and that mean right now is 20 feet essentially. So instead of relying on the current measurement, which we could, in talking with the building inspector, he said the average height would be 20 feet.
I think my desire is to allow homeowners to build prudent for them. It's a style. I don't think anything above the zoning. I'm leaning closer to principal residence.
I agree with that. I'm just trying to understand why we're using that number 20 feet if there's some sort of reason for it. Otherwise, I feel like people should have flexibility if they're going to make their design and it doesn't compete too much with aesthetics of the rest of the block. Would be in favor of that.
Peak mean is a big
Mhm.
way to establish height. I think anything moving away from that.
Yeah, me too.
And so that was the goal, would be to move away and provide more consistency and clarity with respect to that. I'll be honest, this was probably developed in September, October, and I'm blanking on it, and I didn't prepare for the specifics of why the building inspector and I came upon that measurement. So I apologize. I don't have a remembering or an answer for that. The yeah, the current system essentially for us was not necessarily providing consistent results for people, and maybe that's fine because it's what we've been doing. But with respect to trying to give people an idea of what this could look like, there was a desire to develop that maximum number as opposed to a number that then is not adhered to because the definition says we do it differently.
It seems like with a 20 feet peak that then you could dormer out the sides, which is pretty consistent with primary dwelling styles. And that's how people handle peaks. And so I don't know if we'd need to, if that would be more of a DRB issue, or we'd have to introduce language here.
Could you help me clarify that? Yeah, dormer would not count. The peak would be the maximum,
Right.
and people would build dormers if they wanted to get more headroom on the
Right.
sides. Design review board does review dormers, and they
Mhm.
pretty consistently ask for, you know, roof pitches that make sense and, you know, siding that matches materials and things. They do look at the details of dormers.
Mhm.
We don't have any sort of guidelines or requirements on dormers. It is a aesthetic review.
Mhm.
But those dormers would be below that 20-foot peak maximum. So
So it would work. It would give headroom and,
Well, no, it would, the 20-foot maximum would then be, what would we call it? The peak mean approach allows for a very pointy structure higher,
Uh-huh.
but then you put your dormers in together. If we make a lower non-peak mean base standard, you're going to make that it have a much pointy roof is good. Does that make sense?
barely,
Is
but
it?
that's,
May I ask a question?
yes, please. I was going to call on you.
Would you be allowed to build a 2-story structure with a flat roof as an ADU?
yes, I mean, right now you're only limited to 15, that 15-foot mean thing. So,
So that would mean your 2 stories are less than 8 feet each.
I'm
mean-
saying, I'm sorry, in the 20-foot example that we're discussing here,
Okay.
I think that complicated.
Mhm. And we don't, so is it that we're trying to look for ways to avoid or to prohibit flat roofs?
I want people who live in the village to whatever's right.
Okay. Uh-huh.
I'm trying to make it easy for them to
To
requirements
interpret.
are.
Yeah, me too.
And not having to do
A
peak mean
calculation.
calculations and then getting crafty with the designer
Yeah,
makes this even more expensive. Dormers.
I agree. So the 20-foot height maximum would accomplish that.
Having a fixed height would, I'm a little concerned that 20 seems shorter,
Oh,
and I'd rather just define it by the primary residence height or not to exceed what is in the district's zoning building height max table. That's how high you can build.
mhm. That seems reasonable. I think removing the calculation is a good idea.
Does the city of Milwaukee have, what is their standard?
I don't have that on top of my head.
Look, Bart.
Commissioner Klein, Trustee McGovern, do you want to weigh in while we're,
I guess I'm sort of coming around to the idea of just having it be simple to understand, 20 feet or what's allowed under the current zoning. That just might be here for everybody.
Mhm.
And the village has already made those calculations previously that this kind of height is reasonable for this or that zone, zoning area. So I think that seems like it makes.
Milwaukee's standard based on my chart, it's not their code, but this was provided in September. Maximum ADU height of a detached structure is the same as the principal building in Milwaukee. So that's what Josh is, I believe,
Thank you.
referring to. Wauwatosa has that 20 foot, so perhaps that's where we also found that number and confirmed with the building inspector. So yeah, it looks like our current draft is based on Wauwatosa, and Milwaukee's would be allowing more height. But if we trust my chart, which I hope we can, that's what was shared previously, which I think is where we ended up landing on where we're at now. Oops.
Is there a motion?
Principle. I don't want to make it more complicated than going to the zoning districts. I'm checking with my
Mhm.
commissioner chair.
Not yet.
Mhm.
Okay, so
I mean, I
go for it.
think the general public would probably prefer it not to match the height of the primary dwelling. But I can't think of a way to, or maybe it's 30 feet or something. I don't know.
I
Or-
mean, I'm thinking like between 20 and 30, why don't we pick a
25?
number in between? If that would help people build what they so desire to have, if it's a 2-story or whatever that looks. But that's where I'm looking for some help with the architectural aspects.
And I don't know, average heights. I mean, we have very diverse architectural styles in the village. And so that's where Derb, design review board, and myself always struggle in trying to find some sort of guideline because every house that comes in is different, right?
Right.
So the 20 foot was, I believe in the building inspector's mind, big enough to allow for a second story above the garage while still being lower than the primary structure. In typical standards, which I think we felt and was discussed in terms of matching the existing context. So it's not changing much of right now. Accessory structures in the backyard are smaller than the primary structure in the front of it, right? So the current version didn't drastically change that. Milwaukee's does allow them. So I'm not saying that we can't do that, not because Milwaukee does it either way, but we could do whatever we wanted. I think the current draft was developed based on a realistic 2-story accessory dwelling unit that still fit the context of our neighborhoods.
Mhm.
Did you just say 2-story, or is that too vague for people who might be wanting to build something? I guess you could do 2 stories and an enormous attic.
I say we could say 2 stories,
Yeah.
but that gives a much more open-ended
Right.
option.
Mhm.
Maybe we should just say principal structure. That might be simpler.
You trying to protect again? That's my big, I want a clean standard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not the peak mean. Okay,
Mhm.
between principal zoning table. What are we afraid of? Gonna happen?
Like the idea of the primary residence being taller than the other one, but, and then we're getting into these specific number of
Aesthetics that are,
feet, it's like 2
Yeah.
feet, 4 feet, 6 feet,
Right.
make it 24 feet, make it 26 feet. So that's right. I don't want to get too hung up on this, but
Agreed.
that was where my mind was at, was, okay, we have the primary structure taller than the accessory dwelling unit. But then also questioning whether people could build what they wanted to build.
okay, I can see primary structure from just a very practical level, practical perspective.
And then the whole concept of an accessory structure is it's not to the same scale as the
Mhm.
primary structure. That's why it's called accessory.
Accessory. So that the expectation should be that it would be shorter.
Right.
Could we do something where it's, I'm gonna make something up, so
Mhm.
for illustrative. 75% of the primary structures out height, and no less. It can be up to 20 feet, some way that we have a fixed minimum, but allow for a possible. Getting too
I mean, it's not too fancy. It's a pretty, we would know the height of the primary structure. We'd be able to calculate a percentage off of that. I don't know that I've ever seen that before. Back to the point of why we're regulating this, I think that's a good question because nothing says your principal structure can't be 3 feet off the rear lot line, right? So that's theoretically your principal structure could be back there. So depending on the configuration of your lot, that is the case sometimes, right? Some people don't have big backyards. And so people are building up that 30 feet close to a rear lot line. It currently is possible. It exists. It's not typical, but it happens. And so, yes, the person behind there, they look at their neighbor's house more than perhaps other lots do. They have less light in their backyard, perhaps, but a tree could do the same thing. So I think to Commissioner Klain's point, it's something that we've historically done with accessories being quote unquote accessories. The primary should, be more reverential or whatnot. But theoretically, whether it's accessory or primary, someone could build in that location. It's just a matter of how the lot's configured.
Your point was very well taken, Commissioner Klain. That makes sense. The title of it is accessory dwelling unit. So I think to expect it to be able to be the primary residence height is a higher expectation than we might be able to reasonably offer. So that puts me back at 20 feet if it was thought from a practical level that it's buildable and all of that. It doesn't offer that maximum capacity, but it is an accessory dwelling unit after all. So I appreciate that. So anyway, we do not have so we may be split. I think somebody should make a motion. I will make a motion that the maximum height shall not exceed 20 feet. Is that the language?
The current draft said
Mhm.
the same as the principal building or not to exceed 20 feet if detached. So we're talking, because accessory dwelling units can also be in an attic and things like that.
Oh,
So,
right.
but 20 feet if detached would be, I think,
Yes.
what your motion is.
That would be my motion.
So moved, or seconded rather, sorry.
Okay, motion by President McCaig, seconded by Commissioner Klain. Any further discussion?
Can I ask a question about, so height limits were ranked as the second most important regulation to maintain? Meaning that people wanted to stick with the 20 feet.
Well, right now it's
I mean, what is
it's the
being
15
proposed.
feet mean, so, this would essentially stick with that, but it would clarify that 20 feet is what we're expecting.
My interpretation is that the motion on the floor is consistent with the survey results. Further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 3-2. Thank you. Is there one more?
I'm not sure. So design was always intended to go to design review board.
Yes.
There's nothing really else that we would change on that.
Mhm.
Parking, we discussed,
Yep.
the short-term rental prohibition.
Yep.
We
so
left off with saying that we would make sure we included it within the code language so it's clear what we can do. And then lastly, would be owner occupancy at the time of construction. I don't recall if it's, I mean, it's left in here as a bullet point. I don't recall that being a requirement at last discussion. But it's something that we could do, and the majority of the survey respondents did favor that as a regulation.
What's our current practice?
Madam Chair.
Oh, no.
What's our current practice on short-term rentals in the village? Or like a primary residence?
So, based on state statutes, we're not allowed to prohibit them if the stays are for 6 days or less. And so we need to have we need to have proof that the stay is for less than that, which honestly, they probably always are, but we don't have documentation to be able to give a citation and take it to court. So, unless we have proof that it's that, and that proof is hard to come by, we have not been able to successfully enforce our code language.
I do think
Madam
that's something
Chair, I-
that we're going to have to address one way or another. And I understand the limitations imposed on the village by state law, but that's something that was really consistent in the comments where, you know, a lot of the comments that were in favor were really based on personal experience. You know, people were talking about affordability or family member that they would like to have an ADU for, and then some of the comments either opposing ADUs or saying I'm okay with ADUs if it's regulated, dealt with people's experience in Shorewood with having Airbnb next door or behind them. I'm just wondering what we can do as a village to enforce the rules that we have that are, you know, for the benefit of the people that live here. And, you know, it can be, I use Airbnb sometime. I understand why people would want to rent out their house that way, but I do understand that it can be a real hassle for people that live nearby. And so maybe this is something that we can't really address in this meeting, but I think it's something that as a village, you know, maybe we could find a way if the issue is that we need to find proof that the rental is for less than 6 days. I mean, you can just go on Airbnb and say, okay, I want to rent one for 2 days and make your reservation. Like that would be, I think, pretty good evidence of a violation if that's all there is to it. But I think it's something that's going to come up over and over again while we're discussing ADUs with the public.
I would say in response to that, noted, and yes, it's definitely out of scope for this discussion, but it sounds like a future initiative.
I'd like to make a comment about the short-term rentals because it is included in the state legislation. My understanding is that there's a prohibition on short-term rentals included in the ADU legislation that's pending, and it will be reviewed in February or March in one of the floor periods. So it's been passed committee and with bipartisan support. So I would like for us to have a reconciliation between what we're doing and what's happening at the state level.
Well, I definitely think that we can, my understanding was, or Commissioner Pollack, would you like to speak and then I'll.
Yeah, this is where I haven't looked at the language since last year, but I don't think that's one of the ones. Deviate from the, I thought that was
Mhm.
not the. Yeah, that we can't do. So yeah. So if that happens, I think.
Yeah, I was under the impression, so I might be mixing metaphors here, but I was in the impression that we would prohibit them with the understanding that with our current policy, with the understanding that enforcement is difficult. And so that's where we could maybe look at other enforcement mechanisms, but that we are allowed to prohibit and that minimal language would be in our ordinance. And then to your point, if it passes at the state level and we can't even do that, is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, if that happens, I think that's.
That's the
there's no-
last
there's-
word.
Yeah,
Exactly.
There's no further discussion. I take more of a middle ground. I think the primary reason I like AUD because I want more housing in Shorewood,
Mhm.
not want the financial or the primary rentals.
Mhm.
Again, thinking affordability. Small percentage of the time that you're renting your unit, like that's how makes it affordable. Like that's great. Like, both, but it comes down to enforcement.
Yeah, well, I see what you're saying. So it sounds like short-term rentals are allowed with verification. I guess what is it? I think I'm misunderstanding what this clause would be.
And maybe I misspoke 'cause after I said it, I'm trying to remember what I said, but currently the state does not allow you to prohibit short-term rentals if they are for 7 days or more.
Right. Or less.
So
7 days.
we can't prohibit them. We can prohibit them if they're 6 days or less. The question is, how long did that person stay there? And did they rent it as a short-term rental? Or
Oh,
are they
I
just visiting? Are they a friend? Are they a neighbor? We don't know. And so when the question comes to enforcing it, I have one person saying one thing and one person not even available to provide. So in general, enforcement, even if the state prohibits it, is not going to make this a silver bullet because
Right.
it's still going to rely on me having some level of evidence to take to court to issue a citation. So
Right.
the state prohibiting it would be clear,
To be clear,
but it would still, I need proof that that was rented as a short-term rental.
but I'm
Yeah.
not an energy.
Yes, please.
But I'm saying, hey, I have no problem with. I'm gonna make up a number.
Right.
Their AUD that they make 5 days a year.
Mhm.
Great. If that's what makes this pencil fall like that.
Mhm.
When we get into like, hey, you're running an Airbnb, that's separate
Mhm.
thing, and that's.
And I think that it's challenging for us because primary residents, we don't want to be in the business of telling people what they can do with their home.
Yes.
So you
Mhm.
can you can Airbnb your home, but you can't do your ADU.
Mhm.
I mean,
Well,
it's.
That's a very clever idea.
Right.
Yeah,
I-
people do
Yeah.
do that.
I thought that, I guess, again, I would think that whatever is the state policy, state statute around managing short-term rentals is what would be baked into this policy.
That is the current bullet
That's
point.
the minimum. So my understanding was that we were just going to include the minimum level of restriction that's consistent with the state statute. If that changes, then we'll change it. And I think that the survey results and the comments are saying, I wish we could prohibit it all. Well, we can't. So that's not even on the table. So I feel like what my expectation is that whatever the state guidance is on this, it's baked into this policy. Because we wouldn't do anything differently anyway. Knowing that enforcement, that's a whole nother can of worms, which is not our purview here. So I'm not even sure that we need to vote on that because it's.
Correct. We can't go further than state statutes. The
Exactly.
State statutes say we can't prohibit it if it's that 7 days or more. So once again, the current draft would include a notation that rentals of less than 7 days are prohibited, which is the same as the regulations throughout all residential districts.
Right. So I think that resolves that issue. We don't need a motion and we don't need any further discussion. All right. And I'll forget next week. So if somebody stops me on the street, it's very complicated. All right. So it sounds like you have everything you need to draft an ordinance and take it straight to village board because that's what this group wanted last time, correct? That's what I thought I read in the minutes.
Do you not want to see the draft? Maybe I'm misremembering that. I thought maybe I'll let you guys tell me.
Okay,
I can do it either way.
Are we required to have a public hearing on the same
The
ordinance?
village board would have to.
They
yeah.
have to, okay, I didn't know if we have a.
we just
hearing.
make a recommendation.
Okay,
So, I mean, it would be cleaner if a draft came to us and we formally recommended it, and then that same draft went to the village board. I don't think that we're in a sense recommending it because we're
Okay.
confirming the parameters of the policy.
My only thought is that if we get the draft and we have an update of what's happening at the state level, we could have that conversation, but I also could see that happening with.
I'm fine proceeding either way. So just
Okay,
let me know your preference.
Mr. Klein?
just outside my experience, my experience, planning commissions would hear an ordinance and then recommend, they'd have a public hearing. Apparently that's not
Yeah.
the way things is done here.
Well, I think if there's no time sensitivity, I would like the ordinance to come here for that final recommendation so that it's official and we're not,
That is typically
Recommend.
how we do it.
okay,
correct, yeah.
let's do that then.
Make sure that i's are dotted and the t's are.
That's my favorite flavor. Okay. So that concludes item 4. Concludes number 3. Item 4, further discussion and possible recommendation of a zoning code amendment to clarify the location restrictions of office uses within the MX districts. Do you have more information to share with us?
So this is the same as was introduced last time. Once again, it's a cleanup of my error in using the wrong symbol on the chart. So the memo in your packet is pretty much the same as it was last time, except last time was for introduction. I
Right.
heard no objection. This time I'm here to bring it forward as a recommendation. And once again, the draft ordinance is in there. If acceptable to the plan commission, that would be presented to the village board at their March 2nd meeting, I believe.
So yes, so we have introduced this item. We did not give any direction aside from what was presented to us. The draft is before us. Is there a motion to approve or to
So
recommend?
moved.
All right, motion to recommend. Is there a second? All right, motion by Commissioner Klein, seconded by Commissioner Pollock. Any further discussion? It was pretty thorough the last time.
Hmm.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item 5, discussion and consideration of 2025 Plan Commission Annual Report and future initiatives. Director Griepentrag.
Once again, this is an annual process that the village board requests all committee and commissions to submit. So the annual report is pretty straightforward. It's what we worked on in the past year. So just the 6 points in the report. We convened 7 meetings. We had 6 meetings on the Housing Opportunities Initiative. Much discussion, as you're familiar. We did provide a recommendation to the village board on modifying the permitted uses in the P1 district. The board ultimately allowed commercial kitchens as a result. We did hear a zoning petition for a zoning change that didn't move forward. And then we did review the previous draft and then the draft that the village attorney had provided on Board of Appeals as well. So just kind of an overview so the board knows what kind of things we're seeing and actions that we're doing. I don't know that there's much to discuss in the annual report because I think that pretty much covers what we did. If you've got more to add, I'd be happy to consider that. The more perhaps discussion worthy portion of the submission is any future initiatives we'd like to work on. So just as a reminder, we would submit initiatives to work on them in 2027. And so this is provided to the board from all committees, commissions, and departments to say, this is what we're all hoping to work on. We only have so much staff. We only have so much budget. We only have so many meetings. The board will look at all those things and prioritize what they want staff and budget to work on. So this past year, I was, staffed and budgeted to work on housing opportunities. Hopefully we can wrap that up shortly. When that's done, the remaining 2 items that had historically been on the Plan Commission's list were to review and update home occupation regulations and to review and update notice requirements to include residential tenants. We could maintain those 2. We could add to them. We could remove them. It really is up to discussion. I believe in the memo, I had, suggested a link to the comprehensive plan that really is our guiding document here. And so if you had a chance to look at that, if there's anything outstanding that you'd like to work on, happy to discuss including it. But as of now, we would be submitting these two unless directed otherwise.
Future items could be sent in and we could agenda them for future discussion. We don't want to, we don't have the idea. Or do we need, is this time sensitive?
This is time sensitive. So this unfortunately is due by the end of January. Correct. I will say that the board doesn't, or the village manager doesn't disseminate them until March 1st. So if by chance you thought of something in February, I could see whether or not she's willing to allow us to miss that deadline. But I will say staff was directed to get them by January 31st. Ideally, we would have discussed it at the end of last year, but we didn't have any meetings since October, and in October I wasn't thinking about it. So
I would presume that any other projects that are going through the village board or other committees or commissions that would need plan commission involvement, you would have noted them, right, for us? So I'm thinking about things like the DPW lot and I haven't,
Oh, yeah, that'll just,
I don't know if that's something that's at some point needs plan commission involvement.
if it were to become available for redevelopment, then it would need a rezone. So it would come here.
But so
yeah, to answer your question on process, that's why we submit them end of January. The village manager receives them in March. She disseminates them to department heads to make sure that, you know, if the conservation committee submitted something that actually requires us to look at it,
Right.
I would have the chance to say, actually, that needs to come to us. Make sure you include us on that. So it is cross-reference to make sure that we are all on board what things mean. And then they go to the village board, I believe in June. So there is a ramp up where we review them to make sure if an initiative is bigger than what a commission or committee thinks it is, but then yes, we would have a chance to make sure that we say, actually, you need to involve us on that as well.
So I would be, I guess I would lean towards, since we didn't have meetings and it was my decision to cancel because we only had this one item. So I did not, call a meeting. So I'll take responsibility for it. So I might lean on maybe calling in a favor to say, can we, give the commission, 30 days, and at our February meeting, we'll meet no matter what, even if this is the only thing. And then we would consider any additional ideas. On the other hand, actually, no, this is how we would do it. We can see if there are requests for initiatives to be considered tonight. If not, I would take them via email. And if we received any, I'd schedule a meeting in February to discuss, get the consensus, and then see if they could be considered.
I think that'd be a good, and then we can also
I think
discuss with
that's
the village manager to make sure that she's on board with that. But yeah, if we receive something by, February 15th, then we'll put on the agenda. If we don't, we'll
Yeah.
go with the current listing.
Mhm.
another question, just like process questions, but is there any utility in reviewing? I'm sure that you do as with the village man, staff and president, but is there any utility in like us convening with the CDA or any other body to talk about how development was working with the DRB? I see how some villages have their structures set up differently than the way Shorewood does. And I'm just wondering if we need to ever take a look at how.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
had we've had a couple of joint meetings and found them really beneficial, and it was my intention to do it once a year. So I don't know, would we have to include that as an initiative
I'm a little unclear what the
to have a
purpose would-
joint CDA plan commission meeting?
to discuss a
example.
particular topic, or
Long range planning or
so yes, if it was long range planning, that would be an initiative.
Mhm.
Correct. And so once again, to that point, if we wanted to do that and say the CDA didn't want to do it, or however that works, that's why we submit it, to make sure that everyone's on board with it.
Mhm.
If by chance it required any sort of consulting services of, a
Oh,
meeting facilitator,
yeah.
things of that nature, I'm just saying in general, whatever we submit would be reviewed to make sure we have all the pieces known. Not that we get into it and then realize that we need to do something else, or
Mhm.
maybe we should include the bid with it too, right? So, if that's something that, the plan commission would like to submit, I would suggest that you flesh that out in terms of the
An initiative.
intentions, the goals, the expected outcomes, so that when it's submitted, we as staff can review it and make sure that it aligns with what we're thinking. If it's simply to meet to do less than long range planning, and
Yeah.
that nothing stops us from
Calling a meeting.
calling that meeting. But yeah, if it is more of a
Yeah.
effort,
Yeah, I wasn't thinking.
and
Anyway,
I don't know
we-
what the goal was. Yeah.
Thanks with the DR and the plan. Municipalities. So. Yeah. Apparatus we have in places.
Yeah.
Or do we need to have some conversation? I'm not trying to make it work for everybody, but
Mhm.
I realize that I am.
That's the question. What should we be working on?
I mean, when you listen to some municipalities, their plan commission reviews a project holistically and I know we have a lot of great people in Shorewood, so we're trying to make use of volunteer leader. Right. And I don't have a perspective one way or the other. I'm just asking.
So to perhaps help me think about this out loud, the design review board has annually submitted an initiative to review their scope. I worked in 2 communities, so I can only show the 2 communities that I know of. In West Dallas, we did not review residential properties. In Shorewood, we do. And so our design review board is quite busy with those types of projects. In West Dallas, where we just had one plan commission do both aesthetic and land use reviews, they were only reviewing new commercial larger projects. They weren't reviewing ADUs on garages, et cetera. So you would need to have some sort of review of municipalities and what their scopes are in terms of what they are or are not reviewing, with design review as an example. But I know of examples where communities don't have design review and plan commission then absorbs that role. I don't think, based on what we currently take to design review board, I do not think that we can merge the 2 groups. That's my comment at the moment, unless you remove their responsibilities from them. But this is why an initiative, if that's something the plan commission wants us to look into, that's why we ask, what do you guys want to look into? And then that would be a chance to discuss that.
Like, come up with ideas. You said
Mhm.
Or I don't know what day of the week that is. Make
well,
that
the
sense or
next
not.
scheduled meeting following our cadence would be on the 24th. If we were to have one. So when would you want everything in? So
I typically like to provide the agenda a week in advance, so I would say that if it gives you the weekend to help you think about it, the 16th.
And in a follow-up, could you provide prompts of what would needed to be included in an initiative for it to be a productive discussion? So
Yep.
just a brief outline or a form if you want them to fill out the form.
And like for reference, your previous initiatives were like the comprehensive plan needed to be updated. So that was an initiative that said, we need to do this big project. We want to hire a consultant. We're going to have, months of engagement. That was an initiative.
Mhm.
The commercial zoning update, that was an initiative. Housing opportunities, that was an initiative. They aren't like typically one-off meetings where, where you can accomplish things without bigger effort. So, yeah, I'd be happy to provide, I think we might have it in our policy, an example of what needs to be discussed or thought about.
and then what you want.
That is me,
Oh.
as the
That
planning,
would-
as a department initiative.
All right. So I think we've got direction on that. Can you tell me what the next one is?
Future agenda items.
And they are?
Well, we'll be bringing back the draft ADU home ADU household definition and bedrooms and basement ordinances
Mhm.
for your recommendation next meeting, as well as, I think that's it, would be those three.
Mhm.
I have also been assigned the task of updating the village's vision setback, requirements. I do have a draft of that available, and so it's possible I might introduce that to you at your next meeting. Just need to see what all shakes out with respect to, tasks in the next couple weeks. But beyond that, there's no applications on file. So it's just a matter of us going through and then there is that one that Attorney Bayer had suggested last month. Whether or not that moves forward or gets represented would be, I have to talk to him about
Possibility.
where that lies.
And then duplexes, would that have to be reintroduced as an initiative, or that what would just come back to us?
It would come back to us if he wanted to come back to you. So
Okay.
we could bring it back perhaps after we
Mhm.
make the recommendation,
Mhm.
in March or April.
Thank you. All right, with that, I would take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Pollock, seconded by Trustee McGovern. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we stand adjourned at 7:48 PM. Thank you.
Can you see to it it's not as cold next meeting?